All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you again for being here. This is the first of our three sessions to start talking really about in charting the course for CRL, and this one aptly named Charting the Course Forum on Collective Action Strategy. We'll have three of these sessions in the annual meeting, a chance for you to hear from a couple of your colleagues about what's going on at their libraries, how they are thinking about their work in areas that relate to some of the major branches of activity at CRL. And after they share a few remarks, we're going to ask you to talk at your tables. You'll see that there is a sheet of paper, a handout at your table for us to get some information recorded from you that we can start really building into our strategic planning for the next leg for CRL. With that, let me introduce Amy Wood, who is one of your directors, part of my leadership team at CRL, to introduce this forum and her speakers.
Good morning, everyone. As Jake said, I'm Amy Wood. I'm the Director of Discovery and Technology at the Center for Research Libraries. And I've been at CRL for about 23, maybe a little bit more, 23 years. So, and I would say that to pick up on a theme that Heather talked about this morning, just the power of coming to work every day and really being committed to our mission and what we're doing. I think that I can speak for everyone at the center. That is the way they come to work, and that is the way they continue their work year after year. So we're joined by Lisa. I should have asked you how to pronounce your name. Janicke? All right. Hinchliffe from the University of Illinois, Jason Baumann from the New York Public Library, and Jennifer Osorio from UCLA. So we really appreciate, we'll hear their perspective and their own experiences and then turn it over to you. But I just wanted to, given how much it does mean to me to work at CRL and to do the work for you, that I just wanted to give a few remarks about what collective action is really for us. And it has to start even before I got there. So over really the past 76 years, CRL has been a strategic partner, a steady leader, and a reliable support network to help our members and the broader scholarly community to address some of the most enduring and complex challenges that really face our profession. So I have a table here of some of the real shared challenges. This table represents some of the shared challenges we've worked on and how CRL stepped in with infrastructure, with coordinated effort, and long-term engagement. So when collections ballooned beyond what individual institutions could sustain, CRL helped build shared stewardship models. And when budgets strained under the weight of expensive resources, CRL undertook a variety of acquisitions and licensing programs to relieve that pressure. And when the digital shift upended access and preservation, CRL responded with digitization on demand services, custom holding registries, and tools to support collective decision-making. So CRL's work is so consistent and so infrastructure or network level oriented that it can sometimes fade into the background. But it is that very consistency that has made CRL essential for so many years. And it is what keeps the research ecosystem resilient, adaptable, and more equitable across our membership than I believe any other consortium. So let's focus a moment on one recurring theme, and that's the conundrum, really, the conundrum of redundant collection growth across our library system and the corresponding risk of losing parts of that scholarly record, not just to deaccessioning, but really kind of burying it because we don't have enough resources to actually process it. So these two challenges, they go hand in hand and are in an enduring dynamic that we will continuously navigate and not, rather than solve. They really are not, it is not a problem to solve. It is something we will continue to do. And that's because they reflect a structural reality of our work, and that shifts with changing conditions in internal, external, environmental, and it requires really thoughtful, collaborative responses, not just once, but again and again. And I just want to share, just to dive even a little deeper into it, I just want to share a couple of examples that of really intentional collaboration. So not we built the collection through deposits because, we had a lot on our shelves, so we're giving it to CRL, but really intentional collaborations that built portions of the CRL collection. So the first one it really started in the 60s, and that and went through to about 2000, where CRL partnered with the New York Public Library and the Library of Congress to preserve full runs of about 650 what we used to call foreign official gazettes, so non-U.S. official gazettes. So CRL not only became the steward of most of this physical collection, but it also created and maintained a registry of distributed holdings among about a half a dozen other libraries. So it wasn't always about centralizing the collection. It was collaborative work really across the network. And as that effort was winding down, or really changing focus, the challenge of stewarding print serials was growing to crisis levels in the late 1990s. And CRL responded again by first holding a conference, and I think this is really important. CRL didn't just go off and do work. It held a conference to chart with its members and other stakeholders a strategic and shared course of action. And then, secondly, by taking ownership of key aspects of that strategy. So we didn't determine we were going to do everything. We're not going to solve the problem for the network, but we did take key responsibility for key aspects of that shared strategy. We also began the JSTOR archive to reduce the print burden of each of our members. And just for fun, to give you a visual, I just thought, if you all CRL members, deaccessioned your JSTOR print so that you could depend on CRLs, you would fill up the Hancock building, which is right down the street. If you need a visual, you would fill it up. But instead, you can depend on CRL's copy, and of course the digital. But we also founded and have supported the PAN Forum, a twice-yearly venue to share best practices, information, and ideas among print shareholders. And we've done this since 2009. We built registries for serials and newspaper holdings. We offered cross-institutional collection analyses services. We built partnerships with libraries of record, such as Linda Hall, and we undertook grant-funded initiatives to test bold ideas and to report on the status of our collective work. And all of these efforts have been continuously maintained since that strategy developing conference in 2003. And yet, I've heard colleagues ask, just this last year, what is CRL doing with shared print? Or they've failed to include CRL's holdings in deaccessioning projects or consortial collection analyses. And these oversights really, I believe, are not intentional or the result of disregard. I think people have a great deal of regard for this work. They're just examples of what happens when infrastructure becomes so reliable, we stop seeing it. So when collective action addresses only the urgent rather than the enduring, and that's why your voice, your engagement, your presence right now matters to reinvigorate how we address enduring challenges. CRL's value doesn't come from reacting to the urgent, although we can do that. The value comes from anticipating the important, holding space for long-term solutions that no one institution could tackle alone. So in a profession constantly chasing the next big thing, CRL reminds us that maintenance is a form of innovation, especially when it's done together with care and intention. So now, we'll turn the floor over to you. Well, first my colleagues up here who have graciously, offered to, and bravely offered to give their perspective. But the question really is, what can CRL take on strategically, operationally, collaboratively, that would unlock capacity, opportunity, or transformation at your libraries? So with that, I will turn it over to Lisa.
Great. Thank you, Amy, and thank you for the invitation, Jake, to talk with the group here today. This is my first CRL meeting, and so one of the things, even though I work at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, large research library with great interaction and dependencies on Center for Research Libraries, because I've worked in the public services side of things, I haven't really known what CRL does, which might underscore Amy's point a little bit. When Jake asked me to present today, he gave me the prompt to think about what should CRL do so that your library, you, our members, can do. And as I find myself many, many times going back to sort of some principles in our field of library science, I found myself reflecting again on the degree to which Ranganathan's 5 laws really are so enduring for the work that we do. And particularly, I want to put forward the notion that I think we can understand that what CRL does is powers institutions in meeting Ranganathan's laws. And I'm going to review those for us, because not everyone is as fond of them as I am. You don't have a poster of them in your office, I can get you one. So first, books are for use. Every person their book, and every book its reader. And I think we think about this a lot in sort of the ways that in the moment, but it's really also the enduring that Amy just spoke of. Number 4 is the one that fascinates, and you're going to hear me talk about a lot today, which is save the time of the reader. Okay? We have more contemporary versions of this when people reminded us that the user isn't broken, or Lorcan Dempsey said, put the library in the workflow of the user. But saving the time of the reader is something we do well, and is something that CRL could help us do even better. And then the final is the library is a growing organism. So I think what CRL does enables members to serve their users. And it may not be always the direct service, but what it means is we can get things to users. We can get things to users faster than we could get to them otherwise. And we could get things to users at lower cost than we could do otherwise. So CRL is powering service effectiveness, service efficiency, and service economization. Today, it does that, and I think it could do even more tomorrow. Now, the way I approach this task as somebody who doesn't interact with CRL directly very often is to take advantage of the fact that I have amazing colleagues at the University of Illinois. And so for a couple days, every meeting I was in, when people would be like, oh, does anyone have anything else? I'd be like, oh, well, we've got 5 minutes left. Could I just tell you this talk I'm going to be giving? And like, what's your reaction? Now, first I want to say, every single suggestion I received came first with an appreciation of CRL and the service that the staff provide and the amazing resource that it is. And I want you to hear that because people want a lot, okay? So it's because you're awesome that they want more, and they believe that collectively we can deliver more. Now, I am not going to read you all 35 ideas. I know, Jake. I figure I know how to get them to Jake in another way. But I thought what I could do today is start to sort of get you in the sense of the cadence and the breadth of things that people thought about. I'm going to invert it a little bit and talk about what libraries are trying to do and what CRL might do to help us with that. So libraries need to ensure that researchers today next year, 50 years, or more years from now, have access to authentic and unimpeded versions of publications. And this was really striking to me because the person who sent me this is in our area studies, and so he's very familiar around the world with censorship and the like. It's feeling a little poignant with what Heather gave us today, but CRL should attend to both print availability, but also in its digitization work, ways that we can ensure that users have a confidence in the integrity of the digital publication, especially digital publications that might be vulnerable to censorship, erasure, editorial change based on political pressure and economic coercion. I think in the print world, we had this sense, yeah, but we have a copy of it. But what does that mean in the digital world, and can CRL help build that for us? CRL should accelerate processing and cataloging of back files, so users can discover such materials and libraries can improve the interlibrary loan requesting and fulfillment process. And they have specific examples, the curriculum guides, the foreign bank publications, pretty much anywhere there's a PDF that you consult instead of having it as a bibliographic record, where those bibliographic records also can flow into other systems. CRL should expand its investment in cooperative post-custodial digitization of rare and unique area studies materials, so libraries can provide equitable access to global primary sources for researchers who cannot travel internationally, which again has become more poignant for us here in the United States of late. Specifically, projects such as the South Asian Open Archive should be supported, encouraged, and replicated. CRL should facilitate more collaborative acquisitions and licensing arrangements for non-Western language databases so users can access critical content that is often cost prohibitive for individual institutions. Similarly, CRL should prioritize partnerships with libraries and archives in the Global South so libraries can build more reciprocal and ethical models of collection development and knowledge exchange. Definitely comes from our interlibrary loan person. CRL should develop partnerships and workflows to streamline acquisition of international dissertations, recognizing it's very difficult, so users can access these difficult to find and really important materials. And finally, I thought this was really intriguing framing. CRL should advocate as the collective voice of research libraries for publishers to move from current licensing system for electronic publications towards an ownership model. CRL's strength has been in ownership. This would help libraries to purchase and own electronic publications to better ensure long-term and equitable access to publications, and might also help with that first thing I said of ensuring that what we provide 50 years from now in that digital publication is the digital publication. So I know we're going to have great conversations today about what are your challenges and priorities and how CRL can help. Thank you.
Good morning. So my name is Jason Baumann. I'm Director of Collection Development at New York Public Library. And so I'm running the budget, relationships with vendors, area studies for the research part of New York Public Library, which is really an independent research library in the humanities. And so when Jake asked me to be part of this panel, I immediately thought of just a concrete problem that I'm trying to solve for New York Public Library, and which has become the thorniest problem for me is newspapers. So New York Public Library has incredible collections historically of newspapers, and it's been both the depth and breadth of those collections, and that's been one of the things that's really made NYPL a center for scholars for our whole history. And even I remember one time there was the head of the National Library in Cuba came to New York Public Library for a visit, and we had copies of newspapers from Cuba that they didn't have in Cuba, right? And so we were arranging to get them microfilm of those titles. So, and on the point of microfilm, we had an incredibly strong microfilming program for many, many years, which stopped around a decade ago. but we've continued to collect all of those materials despite not having a microfilming program anymore. And so we've been bundling those newspapers and sending them to offsite storage. And this is the thing that keeps me up, one of the things that keeps me up at night at New York Public Library, because I'm certain that in 100 years those bundles of newspapers are going to be confetti. And also, my other part of that nightmare is a service problem of somebody paging those from our offsite storage, and they get this bundle of newspapers, and how do they use them? And it's also a problem. New York Public Library is part of a consortia recap that's with Harvard, Columbia, Princeton, and now Yale, and serving those newspapers across those 5 institutions that some student at Yale may pull up, may request that bundle of newspapers, and what do they do with them, and how do they serve them there? So we have this problem of print newspapers, and at the same time, and the newspapers are particularly international newspapers, but also U.S. local newspapers, U.S. ethnic newspapers, and a wide range of kinds of materials, many of them not profitable enough to be on ProQuest's radar or some other database company. But many of them are available digitally through a database press reader, which some of you may know of, which as a company started out as actually formatting the digital files for a lot of these newspapers, both in the US and internationally, and makes them available through this database press reader that's licensed through ProQuest. However, they have no interest in the preservation of their files, and I think their contracts with all of the newspapers that they represent only allow them, say, 3 months of presentation, and then the files disappear. Which is one of the other nightmares of all of this, is that they're all actually, they don't have to be digitized, but they start out in a digital format, which is not being preserved. And the last kind of wrinkle in all of this is part of me feels like maybe we should just get out of this collecting newspapers thing. And over again, I find my area studies curators in communication with peers at your institutions tell me that they canceled those newspapers because they thought we were collecting them and preserving them, right? So there's a kind of political and ethical obligation that I feel to continue to collect this history, even though my institution alone is no longer capable of really bearing that responsibility, right? So it seems that there's a shared responsibility and interest in this content, that it's not really, and the responsibility is kind of diffuse, and from my vantage point, it feels like everybody assumes somebody else is taking care of this. This is like the thing, I don't know if it's quite fits the framework, but this is something I'd really like to see if CRL could help with. And it's interesting because it's both a physical problem, a service problem, a preservation problem, and there's also a digital problem there, because you could think of, is there a way to just start collecting the digital, or is it web archiving? Do we get out of the print newspaper altogether and look at where there are web versions of these titles? But it's a big conundrum, and I'm hoping that CRL can be a partner in finding a solution for this.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. So my name is Jennifer Osorio. I am at UCLA, where I am the Director of Special Collections and the Interim Associate University Librarian for Distinctive Collections, which includes our International and Area Studies, the East Asian Library, Special Collections, and our Preservation and Conservation Department. I've been associated with CRL for a really long time. I was our Latin American Studies librarian for many years. I was head of our International and Area Studies Department also for several years. So I've been intimately involved with things like the Latin American Materials Project and the Latin American Research. I always forget what the second R is for, but anyway, LARP. And I should tell you that I'm a late addition to this panel, so my thoughts may be a little inchoate and a little bit scattered because I haven't had much time to really form them. But one of the things that I'm seeing right now is that, for the time that I've been at UCLA and have been involved in area studies, a lot of what I was doing was making the case for UCLA as having a role to play in area studies librarianship, not just for our own campus and our users, but for the community at large. Because we were UCLA, because we were still doing area studies at a level that many institutions had pulled back from, we had a responsibility to do that for the research community, both on campus and nationally and even internationally. Like Jason said, like we have collections at UCLA because we're a Research One institution that has been doing area studies for decades that are not found in their own countries. We regularly get people who come visit us who are like, I can't get this in Mexico or Chile or Japan or wherever, right? So there's a responsibility there that feels very, very heavy to me. But now we are at a moment in time where that argument is getting harder and harder to make. Because even though we are a Research One university, even though we are UCLA and people are walking around with our merchandise all over the place, right? We have very, very significant budgetary and staffing realities that are making it much easier to turn inward again, right? And to say, we have to take care of our own problems right now before we can help other people. And that's really challenging for me personally because it's one of the reasons I like working at UCLA is because of that sort of responsibility and that role that the institution plays in helping institutions that don't have those resources, that may need them but have to figure out how to get them otherwise. And I felt like, this is a really good thing that we're doing, that we are providing this service. So one of the things that I think about as far as CRL's role is how can CRL help bridge that gap, right? How can we help take the resources, the collection building, the relationship building, because in area studies, and frankly, that is my background and my interest, also the primary sources area, the relationship building that has to happen to build those collections is as important as the things. Like, that is a large part of what my career has been about, a large part of what area studies librarians do, is they build relationships locally, internationally, to build those collections. How can CRL help with that? How can we channel the power of this institution, which brings together academic institutions at every level, Research One down to the, not down, across, I don't want to say down, across to smaller liberal arts schools that don't have the ability to do this, but may actually need access to those resources. How can CRL help with that? How can CRL provide the infrastructure that can help us have those conversations, build those relationships, build these collections in ways that are sustainable, that are going to be there in the long term, both for like the actual physical preservation, but also the preservation of those relationships, right? So that we can continue to do that work in a way that doesn't unnecessarily tax each individual institution and that magnifies the work that we're doing. So that's what I would like to see, and I don't necessarily have answers to how that's going to happen. Jake, that's your job. But I've seen it in smaller places in the work that I did with LAMP and LARP, and one of my sort of frustrations about that work, and that I hope is going to be improved with the new structure, is that it was very siloed. So even though area studies people all sort of clustered around CRL, we all had our individual things, and as we're seeing now, and as we've seen with Heather's really great talk and the work and the things that Lisa and Jason said, collective action is where we're going to get any progress. And it doesn't help for me to go to now I'm an administrator, but two hats, weird. For me to go and say, I need this for just my areas. Like, we need to figure out a way to talk about the work that we do as needing that support across all of our lines, all of our regional, all of our subject, all of our language line areas, and how and why it matters, right? Like, I've also been very fortunate that UCLA had a strategic plan roll out a couple of years ago that increase our impact as a global institution as one of the 5 things. So, oh my God, do I say that all the time? Like that is what I say, right? Like it's in the strategic plan, so you got to keep giving me money. But like, how do we do that all at our own institutions and then bring it to CRL and maximize that message and maximize that that action, right? So that's what I would love to see, and I'm hoping that like these conversations that we have at our individual tables can have some of that, because I think that that's a really important role and one that I think CRL could really step into and become a really even more important institution for that, because it's really the only one of its kind that's doing it. There's nowhere else that this is happening, and so I'll leave it at that. I don't know how much sense that made. I've been traveling for 2 weeks, so hopefully that made a little bit of sense.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. I think they really modeled, I think, a really great variety of ways you can look at this this exercise. So coming up with a long list of things that CRL can do, awesome, or to dive deep into a single one, or to talk about relationships and relationship building. So so thank you very much. You all really did model exactly what we needed. So if you'd like, yeah, there we go. So you're welcome to join your tables, I think, and continue working, or and just ask everyone. You have about maybe 15 or 20 minutes to work together at your table, and then we'll ask a few people to share out what their tables talked about. So thanks very much.
I love hearing the low, constant buzz of conversation, and I don't actually want to interrupt it, but I do want to make sure you all get lunch. So if we could reconvene, I would love just for a person from each table to come up to the mic, share an observation or two that you thought was particularly engaging. You have board members sprinkled around. You can put your board members to work if you would like them to do that. I regret to say that as an austerity measure this year, we did not get the dunk tank, so I'll just be standing here to listen. But please, if we could have some people from the tables come up and share some of the discussion.
I have to stand on tippy toe, but I'm Janet Bishop from the Claremont Colleges, and I am a board member of CRL, so I'm leaping into the fray. But we had a lot of interesting discussion at our table. I'll start first with a discussion around advocacy and reiterating, I think, Jake, what you said about the uniqueness of CRL. It is not ARL. It is not West. It is not ACRL. It is unique in terms of what it can do in terms of education and advocacy for the importance of collections and the importance of unique collections as well. To jump on that as well, one colleague at our table observed that West, Rosemont, which is now merged, East, et cetera, really focus on print collections, but not necessarily the unique resources that are hard to find or rare or folks in other countries can't even access. So CRO's role in creating metadata and helping with access and information about that is truly important and would be useful. I'll just have 2 other observations, and anybody from my table can leap in. There was comment about the space problems and digitization projects that CRL can help with, and back to niche collections that CRL had. One colleague talked about a phone fiche, I think. I'm not even familiar with that, but that was am I saying that right? That CRL had. The only other thing I'll mention, because I mentioned discovery is key. CRL making raising awareness of what we do at CRL, and then another colleague at the table talked about the loss of institutional knowledge amongst subject or area studies librarians. In other words, when area studies librarians leave their institution, institutional knowledge is lost. How can CRL help with that with an overview?
Great. Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Who's up next? Peter?
Hello, my name is Peter Bay. I'm from the Bowdoin College Library. And maybe I'll just bring one important item that we discussed in our table. Earlier, Jared mentioned briefly, but in the library's technical service, that the language capacity is being reduced. In a way, the foreign language materials cataloging capability is really being reduced a lot. So, here we discussed how the CRL can help on that matter. And also, in addition to that, use of AI might help us to have better cataloging data, or we can enhance already digitized materials to make it more usable. So that is the one important item we discussed here. And also, as a secondary, not secondary, but the second, the topic we talked about is about what collections CRL collects, and how much users, members' voice will be heard in what types of materials it collects, so that they can justify the spending for the membership.
Great.
Thanks.
Take it away, Larry.
I'll be quick. I'm Larry Alford from the University of Toronto and a board member. We've talked about a bunch of stuff, but one of the things we talked about was the value of the use of CRL collections. Is it worth it if there are two or three uses a year, but then if those uses are $150,000 set of microfilm that you keep for 3 years, or the CRL is digitized that is not otherwise available, that use is probably triple your actual annual membership fee. And in full disclosure, on the board yesterday, we actually talked a bit about how we can talk about that use in different ways as a return on investment. But that morphed into a conversation about what drives use. Is that the librarian expert who works with faculty and graduate students and knows the CRL collections, many of those have gone away in the last few years, or is it metadata, or is it something else? And I don't think we actually knew the answer to that. And we started, but didn't get very far in a quick started conversation on the cost of deaccessioning, the metadata issues that are quite complex and expensive around deaccessioning in print. And is there a role for CRL actually in assisting with that? There's been a lot of work, certainly in Ontario, one of the 51st states, but also RECAP and others have done a lot of work on that maybe CRL could help actually make available to others in some way. Did I cover it?
Hey, Jake, I'm just going to turn my back to you. Go this way. So I'm just going to try to summarize this. A lot of what we talked about has already been said. I'm Matthew Sheehy from Brandeis University and also a board member. We talked a lot about CRL moving from a physical environment to a digital environment and how we could support the digital collections, thinking about IA, Internet Archive, not institutional advancement, in a way that we can model that without the politics or without all the challenges that IA brings. Maybe in a little less antagonistic way is one of the words that was used. A lot about being the repository of last resort was one of the discussions. Also, we talked a lot about collections and area studies, which is still a big interest at our table, and we want to be able to build those collections. And then finally, marketing and discovery, because we felt that a lot of the collections aren't being used, and some of the people at the table said, we've only used like 3 or 4 things from CRL and we don't know why. Or they're saying we have to go so many different places to try to find and utilize CRL, we don't know why. So really some help in figuring out how to make sure the resources that are available through CRL are available to our constituents on campus. Does that about cover it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Angie, you want to take us home to lunch?
I work at McAllister College Library in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm a board member. So just reinforcing everything that was said here, a general sense of, especially those of us who are suffering financially, need CRL more than ever, so kind of doubling down on everything you have to offer. Shared archiving, shared cataloging, shared newspapers, et cetera. I think the thing I heard most loudly was similar to what I just heard there, is people really want to understand CRL to maximize its benefit, and thinking of unique ways of doing that and helping our researchers and our research and instruction folks to really understand, so then they can share that information. There was a novel idea that I thought that I wanted to share of potentially a paid internship within CRL of someone to do outreach and instruction and support. This general sense of people look at the roster of all these wonderful people at CRL but don't really know who to ask for that kind of support. I think that covers most of it, but just this sense of, and then a lot more analysis of the membership and wondering where the gaps are, where we can all come together and extend the work even more than is being done right now. And just an interest in a lot of people to see you, Jake, and have come visit the different parts of the country. So encouraging people to invite you into spaces that maybe you haven't been before, for people who are members and non-members, and get around the country and hear more from everybody to help maximize this work.
Right. Yeah, I look forward to that, and please do. I welcome the invitations, and Angie, I'm glad your table picked up on the question about reference and instruction and liaison relationships. I think in the couple months I've been at CRL, that's been a big topic for us. We've realized that last mile, that bridge to the researcher, is an area where we really need a strategy. We need a connection. That's actually where the value proposition becomes real, and the best way I've found to learn about what we need there is to actually go to the campus and talk to the people in their environment. Thank you all. Allison, Andrea, Molly, if you can stand up in the back. One, let's give these people a round of applause. They are the reason we are actually having a meeting today with food and coffee and everything. But if you can take the sheets you filled out and just make sure to hand it off to them so that we've got all that information and can start rolling it into our own discussions and planning. And with that, we break for lunch, which happens somewhere in this hotel? Up in the big bar.